Hi everybody, welcome to another showing of the X Show. Now tonight we're going to talk about a couple of issues. Number one, you guys probably already saw on the front cover, we're going to be talking about the only way to stop coronavirus. And really it's the only way to stop any virus in existence ever. And it's something that's been covered a lot, but I'll just tell you guys again, this is the only way we have to 100% beat this disease. And it is to test everybody inside of America who has it or who doesn't have it. Because right now, a lot of people are asymptomatic, which means you have the virus, but you don't have any symptoms. You can walk around and spread it to everybody that you shake hands to or cough into the face of. Or even if you're not coughing, you can still transmit this disease. So basically, to control it, it's a very tough process. So basically, if we isolate every single person, if we just test every single person, we pinpoint where the virus is in the population and isolate those people with confirmed viruses, then in about 2-3 weeks after those guys recover, hopefully, then the virus will be completely wiped out. In fact, for every single virus up to this point, that is how viruses rise and fall. Is on the rise in about a little bit colder, around springtime, viruses multiply because it's a perfect climate. And then after it gets warmer, the viruses can't transmit as easy. And then people who are sick already, they've recovered, and the transmission goes down to almost zero. The next year, it starts again. So yeah, besides any vaccinations, besides any medications, and even with those, we have no one certain way to cure this disease. Because you see, the flu virus vaccines, everyone gets them, but even though you do get the flu virus vaccine, there is still a chance that you can't get the flu. So it's not 100%. So basically the only way is to starve it out, is to isolate those people, wait for the virus within them to die, and then everyone will be free of the virus. So apart from that, there is absolutely no other way. All we can do is strengthen our own immune system and also develop some treatments like vaccines or drugs that can help you either have some protection against the disease, or once you get it, it's going to help you recover and keep your health. Okay, so since we talked about the vaccine, this is a pretty hot topic this couple of days. We all heard about White House has moved on to the phase 1 trial of vaccine, and usually this stage takes about 3 to 6 months to get to phase 1, but now we only done that in about 4 to 8 weeks. So I just wanted to walk everybody through exactly what goes into the development of vaccines and drugs. So number one, before everything, you need to have the concept that for this particular virus or disease, we need to develop an immunity system. And for that, we call that the initial stage or the exploratory stage, which means right then people are trying to isolate antigens or identify antigens that can help you, that can weaken viruses or bacteria and can weaken bacterial toxins or things like that. So once you isolated that, then you can move on to maybe seeing this, if this can be developed inside a drug or used to treat the human body. So that brings us to the preclinical stage, which means it's not distributed. This is still not something tested on humans. So basically, you study the tissue culture and the cell culture systems of the antigens or the virus that you're trying to fight against, and then you move on to animal testing. So the first initial stage, the preclinical trial, is animal testing. We need to make sure animals with similar systems to us, like monkeys or pigs, things like that, can react a certain way to this. And while that does not 100% say how this drug or vaccine will work within the human body, it still tells us that something with our similar dynamic, with our similar internal system, can react to the drug in a positive way. So that's a preclinical stage, animal trials. Next, after the animal trials have enough evidence or enough suggestions that it's going to work, we move on to the IND application. Now, what that is the investigational new drug application, which means you can now manufacture these drugs and begin the actual human trials and testing process, which moves us onto phase 1 vaccine trials. Now, there are a total of about 3 phases with an optional 4th phase involved. Number one, phase 1, so the people who are being tried are usually a small group, usually adults. Even if the medication is for intended for children, you still test them on adults first because their immune system is a little more complete and it's a little better tested. So the group of people that are tested usually vary around 20 to 80 subjects in this case, and at this stage there are no placebos or controlled groups, which means the people who are taking this drug know exactly what this drug is and what it is intended to do. So from these people who are all getting the same drugs, we're going to see if it's effective or not, and take some anecdotal evidence to see that if it has some kind of trend towards this drug being effective against a certain virus. Now, once phase 1 is completed and you have your initial stages of data, you move on to phase 2 of the vaccine trials, which means you increase and you expand the amount of people that you test. Usually it goes from 20 to 80 to phase 2, large groups of several hundred individuals. So a couple hundred, 100, 200, maybe more than that. So these individuals are completely healthy, or they're sometimes at risk of having the disease, like people with prior symptoms or prior disease damage or things like that. Some people who are more vulnerable. So you can have a more widespread data to see how this vaccine works in a healthy person and also a not so healthy person, just so you can cover everything. It's more general, it's a more complete result. So in this case, in phase 2, we introduce placebos or controlled groups, which means some people get the drugs, get the actual drugs that are intended to treat this virus, and some people get sugar pills. So this is to see that the good effects from the first stage isn't some placebo effect where people think they're getting better, and because of that, their chemicals are a little bit more imbalanced and they get better that way. So this is to eliminate that by introducing controlled groups. Now, once that has been completed and they got all the data, then you move on to phase 3 vaccine trials, which is again to move on larger trials. So from a couple hundred of testers, we now move on to a couple thousands of testers. And in this case, it is completely randomized, and there are also a lot of double-blind tests, which means some people think they're getting placebo, some people think they're getting the actual drug, and some people have been told that they're getting placebo, but they have the actual drugs, and vice versa. So this is to eliminate any variations in the data to make sure that we have absolutely the most diverse data available and diverse responses to this drug, which means there are less faults involved or less margins of error included with this drug. Now, after the phase 3 vaccine trial is completed, and this all takes around 3 to 6 months usually, then you move on to approval and licensure, which, once you develop a vaccine, of course, you're going to sell it to medical professionals and then you make money off of it. Otherwise, why develop it, right? If you can't sell it for money. So next step is approval, licensure. So basically you license whatever you have and then you proceed to selling it. And then after you license it, which means you can distribute it to the general public. And then there is another stage called post-licensing monitor of vaccines, which means you can now monitor these vaccines you have given to these patients and see if there are any other surprises that pop up. Now, attached onto this stage is also the phase 4 trials. Now, as I mentioned before, this is optional. So that means they don't, the pharmaceutical companies that are distributing these drugs, they don't have to do this step, but they can, which means they continue to monitor any effects the drug may have after the vaccines, the vaccines have been released, and they monitor what effects it has on people, including safety, efficacy, and other potential uses. Can we use this for something else? Then finally, we have the VAERS step, which is the Vaccine Adverse Event Reporting System. The goal of which is to once again detect possible signs of adverse events associated with vaccines. So basically, sometimes after a vaccine has been developed or some kind of treatment have been developed, they can cause some kind of very long-lasting or severe side effects or after effects. And in some cases, they led to serious hospitalizations or anything that may include life-threatening illnesses to disabilities or, worst case scenario, even death. So you can see how from the initial stages of a vaccine concept, from research all the way down to we can distribute it, there is a whole slew of things you have to monitor. You first got to go through animal trials, make sure it's safe for people. This is more of a morality problem, right? You can't test something that you don't know is going to have harmful effect to living organisms similar to the human body. Their anatomy is similar than us, so it should be a pretty good indication. And even after that, you have to be very careful. You can't develop to all of a sudden to a bunch of people. You have to start with a very small group and increase. This is why vaccine development usually takes around 1 year to a year and a half to complete, because all these processes, especially the human testing stage, needs to be needs to have a long time for you to examine the results, and you need to diversify the results to make sure that you're actually getting the correct data. Yeah, so in this case, what the United States have done and what Trump and his administration have preached to us is that we've sped it up. Now, before the initial stage takes about 6 months, 3 months, 6 months till we get to phase 1. But now we've shortened that to 3 to 8 weeks. So which means they've most likely skipped most of the conclusive animal trials in this case. I don't think they skipped any of the licensing or any of the proposal. I mean, that's still needed. And also another reason why United States have been able to move on to phase 1 is because other countries like China, France, Germany have been testing vaccines already. So sometimes they have some data which they shared with each other. And according to the public news work, WHO has gathered these data and everyone has them. So in this case, a lot of work has gone into speeding up the trial, but in this case, looks like they're still rushing it a little bit. And that's why a lot of people who are volunteering to have this vaccine tested on them, it's pretty heroic because they're pretty much taking a very huge risk because they don't know if this drug, this vaccine will actually give them the coronavirus or will cure them. Some of these people are sick, some of these people are healthy. Right now, I think the only person being tested is a healthy individual. So now that person runs the risk of actually contracting coronavirus or some other side effects. They don't know. There's not enough data. Yes, so right now we're on phase 1, so we're going to be phase 2, phase 3, and then after phase 3, we can move on to the actual licensing approval and then distribution, which is going to happen about a year from now on. Although if I were to give you my best estimate, I think it would be a year and a half because 1 year is not enough data collection, especially since most people, I'm guessing, would probably get this vaccine once it's developed because a virus has never impacted us this much in living history, especially for younger generation, for older generation. What we had before this was the H1N1 swine flu back in 2009, the mortality rate of which is around 0.05%. So it's very, very low. It's, I think, somewhere around the flu. So a lot of people got it, a lot of people died, but the mortality rate is still low, unlike coronavirus, which is around 2 to 3%. And then the 2003 SARS virus, which is another respiratory illness caused by a virus. Now, that virus was different. It didn't have as big of an impact because the mortality rate was very high and the incubation period was very low, which means people who got this disease, who got SARS, they would come down sick really fast. So they would not be able to go outside and contact other people and then transmit the disease to other people. So this is another reason why COVID-19 is so dangerous, is because some people can get it and just walk around all fine and then transmit it to people without even knowing, especially us younger people who are the most socially active. Now, I think that's about it for vaccines. So that's one part. Another part I really want to talk about, and something that's very important, I'm sure, to most of us, is that for the past couple of days, for the Trump's press conference, he has continually pushed that the United States Health Services or Health Department has been testing 2 drugs. And the president has at this point told us that these 2 drugs are very likely to work, that the results are very promising. In fact, he all but promised us that this was going to work. He all but said that this is 100% effective against COVID-19 and that Congress should approve these and the FDA should approve the usage of these drugs as soon as possible. So let's examine that a little bit real quick. On the other hand, we should be a little cautious, is because up to this point, Trump has had a history of promising us some things. First, it was that the drug, that the coronavirus is not very hurtful, it's not harmful, it's just like the flu. The death rate, he thinks, with his hunch, is about less than 1%, and also that it's going to blow over. In April, it's going to magically disappear, which it doesn't seem like it's going to be likely that that's the case. So he downplayed it, just tried to keep the economy afloat, and in this case, I think he's also giving us a lot of hope for these drugs, in the hopes of that this news will make investors more optimistic for the stock market and then invest, which will boost up the economy, which I can't really blame him for wanting to improve the economy. But if that comes at the price of people getting false hope and then raising the danger that false hope will be dashed in the future, I think we'll have more harm than good. If people have no expectations, then if the drug doesn't work, then there might be a little bit of detriment to the stock market, but not as much as if they had all this hope placed on these drugs and then it doesn't work. The detriment to the stock market in that case is going to be way bigger, I promise you. All right, next let's see what these two drugs he has been bragging about are. So number one, the drug is called chloroquine, and then another brand of drug called hydroxychloroquine, which is two type of different treatments they're trying to study for coronavirus. Now the hydroxychloroquine, it's like a verbal kind of acrobat I'm doing over here. Hydroxychloroquine, say that 10 times really fast. That drug is used to treat malaria and also arthritis. So this drug has already been out in the market for some time, and it has been used to treat these two diseases and viruses respectively. So in terms of safety, we know that the impact on health or the risks to these drugs are very low, or at least they have been studied long enough for people to draw the conclusion that these drugs don't have as bad of an effect or any unknown bad side effects. Now, these drugs have been proven to be antiviral and antibacterial, which is why people are using it in this case to treat coronavirus. And so United States not the first people to use the anti-malaria drug for this case, is because China and other countries in Europe have already begun testing. So in this case, they have some data available. And those data, I'm looking at it and it does look pretty promising. And is that they have two separate control groups, both of which have coronavirus, and one group which actually got the vaccine after about a period of a couple of days. Trying to see how many days it is. Let's see. I can't see it right now, but it's within a couple of days. I think it was nine days or something, like 2 weeks, something like that. But after those 2 weeks, for the first group, which actually received this drug, the hydroxychloroquine drug, so those group came away after about 2 weeks with about 25% of the people still carrying the coronavirus within them, which means 75% of the people have already had it disappear from their system. The second group, which did not have the treatment, had a placebo, those group, after about a period of almost 2 weeks, came away with about 90% or so of those people still having the coronavirus. So from this point, you can tell that, oh, wow, this drug obviously is having some effect. But unfortunately, in this case, if you're in the science of making medicine, you can't just take something like this as an absolute indication that it's going to work. There's still many more trials that you have to go through. I mean, it could be that the first group was given the right drug and they were told that they were, and the second group maybe knew that they were. So there might still be some placebo in play here. The main thing is that in the medical procedure of creating drugs, you need a lot of trials and retrials and then monitoring of data to make sure they can actually be used and distributed for the people, which is the safest for everyone. So yeah, in this case, even though the data looks very good, we still have to wait. But looking at this, I can see how President Trump would promise everybody that this drug is going to work, that the combination of these two drugs is going to be very effective, and the FDA should approve immediately. I think honestly that the guy should learn from his past mistake and stop promising things that he thinks isn't true for some short-term stock raising. But yeah, it does actually look like these two drugs is going to have some promising effects. Yeah, we'll just have to wait till the CDC have some further information coming in. Another thing I want to talk about is that actually Trump has been bragging about this medicine for the past 2 days. He has went on press release and press conferences and told everybody how effective this is going to be. But the first 2 days, and this is a pretty funny fact, the first day behind him were Dr. Fauci and also all the other health department, like certified doctors who actually know how clinical trials work, who know how medicine trials would work and how long it takes before we can promise a medicine is effective. So yeah, so those two guys, after Trump is on stage promising this drug is awesome, it's a miracle drug, it's going to work 100%, they've both come up and said, yeah, so the results are anecdotal, which means that we don't know if it possibly works. It might not, we don't know. And then Trump's come to stage, he's like, yeah, it's going to work, I think, I'm very positive. And then they come back and say, well, guys, yeah, we don't know, like we don't. We have some promising results, but at this stage, yeah, we can't promise you anything. And then that happened for 2 days. President Trump comes up and those two guys come up and kind of just says he's not right, guys don't listen to him. And on the third day, which is today, during his press conference, you'll notice that those two doctors, which have been almost at every single press conference for COVID-19, are not present. because I think Trump has gotten tired of them contradicting him every time he said, oh, this is a good drug, trust me. So now who did they bring? They brought a CDC person. He was a chairman, I think, pretty high up there. But he came up and pretty much every other sentence he was kissing Trump's ass. So I can see why Trump wanted him on there. And also the Surgeon General, who's been very approving of all of Trump's things. And they've all come on stage and when they are asked questions and when they said things, they're also every other sentence contains a compliment for Trump under your leadership, under blah, 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 things like this. So we can see that Trump is definitely trying to make the investors of our of United States a little safer, a little more at ease, so they can invest more money. Yeah, so everybody else, let's try to be positive, but let's not try to be overly optimistic in terms of the drugs or vaccines. The vaccines, 100%, they're not going to be ready by the time this all blows over. But the drug, I think, is going to help a lot of people, and I'm fingers crossed, really hoping that it works for everybody, so that people who are suffering right now, people who will be suffering, they'll be minimized, or they can avert their oncoming suffering and fight the virus. Okay, so that's actually about it for today. Yeah, I just wanted to go over with you guys those two information. Yeah, so our show pretty much goes on air every single day except for Saturdays, and sometimes we might even include Saturdays. So around 7:30 to 8 o'clock. We're not sure what time yet, but we'll tell you when we know. Absolutely. Yeah, so if you like our content, please like and subscribe to our channel. We'll try to bring you the best of content, best updates every single day. And yeah, that's it. So thank you so much for watching. Have a good night. And if you're going outside or doing any activity at all, be safe, wash your hands, and avoid large gathering of crowds. Thank you so much, you beautiful people. I'll see you next time.